So now the next part of our program is the panel discussion. So it's going to be chaired by my colleague Elena Sultana from RSSD. And with us we have Dr. Konstantinos Makantasis, who is an individual fellowships grantee. We have Professor Vasilis Valdramidis, who you saw in the video, who is awardee of 2 ITNs. Well done. And Professor Helen Grech could not be with us today, but she sent us a video with some information and presentation. And Lily will be joining us again in the panel as the national contact point. So the floor goes to you.
Right. Okay. Okay. I think it works. Aitana. Hello.
I don't know. There's a Dr. Aitana Radu. So sorry about that. Who is awardee of an ITN as well.
Okay. We can look towards the video that we. Okay. Good morning. I would like to ask the audience to prepare the questions in advance. The audience that we have online can type the questions in the chat box in the Zoom video, and I would like to encourage the audience to prepare your questions as well. So we can start with the introductory. Yes, we can start the presentation. Okay, so we have our audience, and I would like to introduce a trio of our distinguished guests. We'll start with Aitana. Aitana, would you like to have 3 minutes to introduce yourself and just a short note about your Marie Curie fellowship? We lost the presentation. Okay. Okay, you can start. Okay, thank you.
Okay, good morning. My name is Aitana Radu. I work at the Faculty of Media and Knowledge Sciences in the Department for Information Policy and Governance. We are partners in Marie Curie. It was called the ITN, a European Joint Doctorate, where we set up joint doctorate in the field of security science, the first of its kind actually in Europe. And we have been partners in this project for now 5 years. It was supposed to last for 4 years, but because of the pandemic, it was granted a 1-year extension so that our 15 ESRs can finish their dissertations, their doctoral dissertations, and hopefully some of them will actually reach viva phase and complete fully, not only complete, let's say, the more formal part. The project started in 2017, and as I said, it is focused on an interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary approach to security science. We are looking at various things from the oversight of intelligence agencies to security ecosystems, cybercrime, I don't know, open source intelligence, identity management. We have quite a variety in our 15 ESRs. And for the University of Malta, we are supervisors of 3 essential PhD students, and we are co-supervisors of another 4 with other partners from the Netherlands, Australia, Italy, and Norway.
I can see that you have a very impressive consortium. I guess some of the audience will be interested in asking you questions how you working with such an extensive consortium. It's actually the perfect shape and size of the consortium, as Lily can confirm. But let's discuss it during the questions. So our next guest is Konstantinos. Would you like to introduce yourself and your project?
Sure. Thank you. Good morning. Yes, my name is Konstantinos Makadasis. I'm an electronic and computer engineer, and I received my PhD back in 2016 on the field of machine learning. After that, I was employed as a postdoctoral researcher in 3 very competitive laboratories and institutes in Malta, in Greece, and in Cyprus. And in 2018, I decided to go for a MSCA individual fellowship. Actually, I wanted to work on a project specifically tailored on my research interests. So I went for it. The first time it was rejected, but it made me work harder. So I reapplied in 2019, and I received this grant. This grant is about modeling effect of different users where they are interacting with different means, for example, games or sites in the internet or whatever. And what we are trying to do is to create models that can actually model their emotions and capable to generalize across different users, across different tasks and things like this. Now I'm in the middle of the project. The project so far is going according to the plan. The rest is history, I guess. Thanks.
You were very lucky. You got your application from the. You got your project from the second time you applied. I hear sometime about the applicants trying up to 5 times. So it was a
yes, it was the second time. The second time. The first time I received the seal of excellence, which means that the project was good. I had the project already written and I had the evaluators' comments, so it was easier for me to make it better and reapply.
You received the seal of excellence?
Yes, I received the seal of excellence.
Fantastic. So let's introduce Vasilis. Now, Vasilis, you also have a very impressive consortium. I guess if we were to draw a lines between the consortium, there will be quite an impressive web. Can you introduce yourself and your project, please?
Hear me? Yeah. So my name is Vasilis Veldramidis. I joined the University of Malta back in 2011. I'm associate professor at the Department of Food Science and Nutrition. And before coming to Malta, I spent quite some years around Europe, which helped me a lot actually to develop a network that I have to admit it had an impact also on participating to this type of calls. So my background is in food science, and I have a PhD in chemical engineering that was in Belgium. I had the opportunity to travel for about 6-7 years following my PhD as a postdoctoral researcher in some of these countries which are part of this network actually. So I was in Ireland for a period and in France. And now here is one of these ITN networks. We are involved in 2 more currently. They are all in the same type of category. This is the one that is about to finish in a year. And it was related to the video we've seen before. So it has to do with the impact of climate change on food spoilage and food preservation. So we try to see how forecasts of stress scenarios in our environment, so changes of the temperature that we experience actually the past months and weeks, the carbon dioxide levels can affect also the food safety of our products. And yeah, mainly there are a lot of partners. What you can see there is also there are partners from industry. And I think that was very highly appreciated and evaluated because I have the impression that they want to see an impact which is very applied also, and it can influence the way some industries are currently operating.
Thank you very much. The panel today represents a number of points that are very important for Malta. The cybersecurity, and cyber behavior, the migration and bioeconomy, all those points were mentioned quite a few times during the presidency of Malta, already 4 years ago. So, let's proceed with the questions that we prepared for Konstantinos. I don't know if we have any questions from the audience. If we can check. Not yet. Okay. Do we have questions from the audience present at the moment? If you don't mind, we start with our pre-drafted questions, so then you can interfere and intervene at any time. Okay. We have some time to answer all the questions. Yes. She found the microphone and she's going to read the questions.
So we have can you hear the mic working?
Hello, hello.
Hello? So we have a question from Ahmed A. Khalifa. A quick question for Lily. Is the postdoctoral action only restricted to new postdoctorate hires, or does it include new faculty hires who just moved from other countries to Malta? As I just finished my PhD and got hired by the University of Malta, and I'm wondering if it is applicable to me. Sorry if the question is simple, but I just got confused because of the name change from individual fellowships to postdoctoral fellowships. Thank you in advance.
Hello? Okay. So, yes, basically, as I mentioned, there is this mobility rule. So the mobility rule is that if you have been in Malta for less than 12 months by the time of the call deadline, so the deadline is on 12th October, so you have to calculate 12 months before. If you came in Malta in the period after, then you will be eligible. No matter that you're already employed and you already have a contract with the University of Malta, you can apply again with the University of Malta with the same faculty or with different faculty. This does not matter. It depends, of course, of your research project. But it's important that you have to respect the mobility rule. So if you came in Malta before the 12th October and thus you spent more than 12 months in these last 3 years, then you won't be eligible. So it's a matter of respecting the mobility rule. You already mentioned that you have the PhD awarded, thus you are completing Quantic. The fact that you're already in Malta does not mean that you're not eligible. You just have to make calculation of the months. I don't know if it's clear.
Not sure if he answered, if the question is clear. Sorry. But did he answer? No. Okay, so it must be clear then.
That was the only question from the virtual audience in the chat, right? The chat. Do we have any other questions?
Were there any other
chat?
questions in the chat so far? No. Okay. Just let us know if there are more questions. I would like to ask a question, mostly directed at Vasilis and Aitana. What was your experience on sourcing and working with industrial partners? They might not be, much into research, into applying for funds, so I'd like to know how your experiences, what challenges there were and how you overcame them. In our case, we had well, also industry partners, but we had mostly practitioners, security practitioners, so like who are not into research either. And they were interested because of the potential employability of our ESRs. The reality is that there are very few trained security practitioners who receive, let's say, formal interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary training. So they were willing to join the consortia for this reason. And also in our project events, we had people like Europol, Interpol, very interested in participating, Council of Europe, because they were interested in seeing whether they can employ some of these PhD students. They were already residing in Europe because many of them are third country nationals. And they were trained, they had both a legal, technical, practitioner background. So we offered quite a rare merchandise, let's say, for this kind of organizations. So that's their interest and basically in future employment.
Should I say for my experience? So in our case, especially in this project, it was based on the network of the academics. And what I can say is that we managed to bring these big companies because our main contact was a researcher working there that we have been interacting or we have been meeting in conferences. So it was directly a research person that can appreciate the research and the research and development aspects. And from that person, then it was further communicated. It takes long for industries to make a decision on participating in this project. So it's good to contact them quite in advance because it has to be approved by their internal procedures. But yeah, it's important to have a contact person that can understand the whole concepts because we'll be the one to communicate to a higher level.
Okay. Curious also about kind of to get their input on the proposal, to explain to them about the. I mean, this is quite an easy application. There are no bureaucratic requirements, but like, did you find any challenges regarding getting their input on their part of the proposal?
Maybe we could interview them and publish the interview in the EditSync magazine, the magazine of University of Malta. We can just interview them at length and publish it, and it will be like a continuation of this panel. What do you think?
Just to reply to Angie, and then you can probably add on that. It varies a lot. Sometimes they are really engaged with the idea and they can give you direct input. But so far, I think the drive comes a bit more from the academics. But what we try to do is to try to address also current challenges for them. Otherwise, they will lose interest immediately or they will not be interested. Now, to have a direct input on writing is not very common because they have to deal with day-to-day troubleshooting, which has a direct impact to their revenues, and it's a top priority than getting a research project or not. But I mean, even at this level, to get a feedback on the ideas and to see how their challenges can be translated to scientific objectives, it's already, I think, very important for us. So.
Completely agree. I would say, from our experience, they are interested in sharing what they want to get out of a project, what are their key interests, but we have not had an experience where an industry partner or let's say a practitioner partner was very interested in contributing at all to the proposal writing. What they would also want is a veto at the end on commitment, staff, budget, where that is very interesting because obviously that's sensitive from their point of view. So that's and veto, let's say in the very last stages, but to our extent, that was as long as we stayed in line with what they wanted to get out of it, so what they wanted to do, that was kind of the most of their contribution.
It's a good balance because like it's a very results oriented, so you make sure that you team up with the users of the results of the project. So I think it's a great mix. Thank you so much for this.
Maybe just in the meantime, just to add something on that point before the other question, from my experience, I did see quite a number of actually applications where the industry is the coordinator and is taking charge of writing proposals, but it's not, it really depends of the objectives of the actual company and how much they see the involvement, not the involvement, the participation in new funding programs as part of their basically plan, you know, and objectives. So there is a mix. Of course, most of the applications are from the academic sector, but yet there is industries that are keen on participating and even writing.
Okay, following up to that, I would like to ask, first of all, how more impressive for the evaluators is to see a coordinator from the industry instead of the scientific community, whether this is considered a plus or a negative from the evaluation point of view. So this is a general question because Marie Curie is focusing on excellent science, so I would like to know that. And the second is regarding, I think you mentioned that there was also Interpol or Europol involved in the consortium. So how, because this is something I think very impressive for the evaluators. So I guess how did you manage to convince them, or how hard it was to convince them to actually be part of the consortium, and whether they were part as beneficiaries or were part of an advisory board, and whether you advise to have something like that as a role in the future Marie Curie actions. So that's the second question. And the third one, since I have the microphone, so I take advantage of that, and then someone else can take the lead, is I'm very pleased to see in the panel one lady from Romania, two people from Greece, I'm from Greece actually, also. So the question that I asked, and this is actually as a reflection to see what kind of University of Malta should take into consideration for attracting research talents from abroad. So my question is, what actually attracted you to come to University of Malta and leave your countries, and take that into consideration while you will be attracting other talents from research from other countries? Thank you.
So, did you direct your question to one particular member of Parliament, or
The second one.
Yes.
I can start with the first one regarding the evaluation. Basically, it really depends on the experience of the company. So if the company, if the industry, it's already has an experience and a background in participation in other EU projects or projects within the same program, then maybe can take on the lead in a consortium. But if it's a newcomer, of course, this will be not evaluated positively. But if it is with already proven experience and with, of course, research being the main objective of the company, and apart from participating in new programs and projects, has a good profile in R&I activities, of course, this will be evaluated positively. In terms of the actual official evaluation, they will not distinguish between the academic and non-academic sector. But the participation of the academic of the non-academic sector in all these type of actions is very, very much encouraged. And usually the successful projects will have academic and non-academic participation. They would have a mix. Another thing in terms of evaluation is if, for example, two projects score absolutely the same, then there is other criteria in order, and the funding is available only for one of them. There is other criteria that come to the decision. One of which is if it is a private sector being part of the consortium. There is another, like for example, in terms of gender, like female, there is different scoring, but also one of them is the private sector involvement. So yes, generally it's very much encouraged.
The second question is regarding the Interpol involvement.
Yes, on Europol and Interpol. We had, so partners, we had the Netherlands Forensic Institute as a partner. We have had Interpol and Europol as full partners in Horizon, though, projects, not in this one. In this one, they offered support, and we included them in the proposal based on that support as potential places, not potential, they offered secondment for our ESRs. Now, I need to make a comment about, let's say, one of the limits of Marie Curie that we've encountered. While we have had agencies as prestigious as this and organizations such as this being very interested in participating, we have had, though, our PhD students being denied or having great difficulty in securing security clearances to work directly there, for example, at the Netherlands Forensic Institute, because they were coming from third countries that were politically complicated. We opened our, it was a conscious choice to, when we recruited our 15-year SARS, to go as broad as possible. And I think from a research point of view, we were better for it. From how difficult it was to ensure getting them access into various security institutions and getting them good secondments and having them do meaningful research, it was much more complicated. And we did feel the need for more support in this, because it wasn't something we could influence the country that that person comes from. They were recruited solely based on excellence. And unfortunately, they had to, we even had, I think, at least 2 ESRs who dropped before the end of their PhD journey because of the complicated political situations that they found themselves and the difficulty of working in this sector in Europe. But I think this might be a very specific problem because of the sensitiveness of the research that we are dealing with in this field of security and intelligence. And just to briefly comment on what brought us here question, European funding brought us here to a certain extent. My first connection with the University of Malta and my current colleagues were where I was representing a security organization in my own country, in Romania, who was was interested in broadening our participation in EU funded projects. And from one research project to another, at some point, the relationship built, and this is how I ended up at the University of Malta. And I do feel that in this current position, there is a lot of opening, at least in our, and I can only speak obviously about our department, there's a lot of opening and a lot of fostering of participation in research and developing one's own research, which for me as an academic, from an academic freedom point of view, is one of the most important considerations, having a place where I can develop, be creative, build, and you know, try new things, from a Marie Curie to different Horizon projects.
But I'm sure you had a lot of choices. Why you've chosen University of Malta instead of any other university through your network? Because you've been collaborating. And I'm saying that not for me to know personally, but I'm saying that for University of Malta to see what kind of assets to exploit while they are promoting their university for attracting research talents. It's just to facilitate the discussion.
Again, this is a very specific. What I missed when Elena asked me to introduce myself is that I was a former intelligence officer in my country. Research came second. Not many universities in this world allow research in this field, especially in Europe. That's why even our Marie Curie is so special. What it offered me, what our colleagues, my current colleagues offered me at the time, was a chance to. I love the field of intelligence, but there isn't much research being done on it because of various considerations. So it offered me an environment where I could really develop in this area. I could still do research in this field. I could still work on policy-related issues in this field. And there are a handful of places in Europe where one does that in research and teaching. Spain, the UK, Malta in our department, Romania, where I come from, at the National Intelligence Academy, there are not very many. So one was the fact that I could still work in this field, which was a very strong point with limited choices. And second, the openness of the environment. I have studied abroad, I have worked with other people, and I found that the academic freedom was the most here. And I was something, I work on issues that really test that to the limit, so I can really vouch for that. So for me, it was that. Also quality of living. I am particularly, I love the country and I love living here. So that also was a consideration, obviously.
So my experience. After I obtained my PhD and I'm from Greece and I studied in Greece, I decided to go abroad to work as a postdoctoral researcher, and I went in Cyprus. I think it's good to go abroad for networking purposes, to see how things outside your country are working. Okay, to be honest, Cyprus is not that different than Greece, but it's something. And while I was there, I decided to apply for a Marie Curie individual fellowship. And I decided to do that because I wanted to work on a proposal written by me and tailored exactly based on my research interests. So when I decided to apply for a Marie Curie individual fellowship, actually I was looking for a supervisor, not for a country or a university. And the first person I contacted was the Professor Giannakakis, who is a faculty member here at the University of Malta, because of his CV and his research interests. She accepted to be my supervisor, and that's how I end up here in Malta. I didn't choose the University of Malta, I chose a supervisor.
Now, regarding my experience, I'm away from Greece since 2001. So I went abroad to do my PhD in Belgium. And then I was actually mobilizing myself based on my research interests. So that's why I moved then to France, then I went to Ireland, and then I was looking for an academic resident position. And there was an opportunity here that was quite broad, and I had already the feeling it will allow me to direct my research interest in the area I want without restrictions. So I found it a very attractive offer, and that's why I ended up here.
So freedom of research is a key factor that we mentioned from two colleagues here. All right, thanks.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions from the audience and from the present audience? If we can start with the pre-drafted questions, and the questions we pre-drafted is in a way for you to you can really say a little story of your application. So what made you apply for? I already mentioned it, but then you can like continue with the storytelling, go into your experience in preparing your proposal, and you already mentioned the supervisor. And this storytelling is important for the future applicants to actually relate to it and to reflect it in the application. And that's the reason why we structured the questions in this particular way. So over to you.
Okay, thank you. While I was a postdoctoral researcher, I decided to apply for a Marie Curie individual fellowship. And I know that it's very important. Every grant is very important for conducting research. Actually, to be honest, it's very difficult to conduct research without financial support. And while every grant is important, this specific grant stands out, and stands out because it's an excellent record for a researcher's CV. It indicates research excellence, research independence. The researcher can add value to his CV by acquiring different kinds of skills, technical skills, not only research skills, training skills, networking, etc. So I decided to apply for this call. First of all, yes, I checked that I am eligible to do so. Then I selected. I made my research to find a supervisor. I contacted several persons. The first one was Professor Giannakakis. Everything was okay, and he agreed to be my supervisor, and we started to work on that proposal. So the most important thing, according to my view, is the idea of the proposal. It's very important, the idea to be very specific and be very concrete. I remember I met once a professor at Imperial College who told me that every sentence in the proposal must add value to the proposal. There's no room for redundancies. So the most important thing is the idea. This idea must be concrete, must be feasible within the time frame of the project, and realistic. After having the idea and contacted the supervisor, I start working on the proposal, writing the technical part of the proposal. This part can be written actually by the researcher and the supervisor. And at the same time, I contacted the appropriate entities at the University of Malta, the RSO, RSSD, in order to have a feedback about administrative issues. This kind of things cannot be written either by the researcher nor by the supervisor. And actually, yes, the most time-consuming part was reading the excellence part related to the idea and the implementation part. The impact part, which is also very important, it can be written much easier. I prepared the proposal. I submitted the first time in 2018. It didn't accept it, as I said before. So the next year, I take advantage of the IPAS call from MCST. It's maybe Lily can tell us later a few things about IPAS call. Actually, it gave me the money to hire an expert to review my proposal. So yes, having an already good proposal, the feedback from the evaluators and the feedback from the expert, we managed to make the proposal much better, and the second time it was accepted for funding. So I started working on that proposal on June 2020. I'm in the middle of the proposal, the project right now. And so far, so good. It goes according to the plan. Now, regarding what should a successful relationship between the researcher and the supervisor look like? Well, I think that the key words here is mutual understanding. There should be an intersection between the research interest of the researcher and the supervisor, and this intersection should not be an empty set. Okay, it's very difficult for the research interest of the supervisor and the researcher to be exactly the same, match exactly. So on the one hand, the researcher must be open to new research directions proposed by the supervisor and take advantage of his knowledge or her knowledge regarding several skills like paper writing, writing technical reports, proposal writing, etc. And the supervisor at the same time should give all the necessary time and space to the researcher to conduct the research that he or she likes, of course, based on the research objectives of the project. Now, if that not happen, I think it's very difficult that relationship to be a bad one, because the role of the researcher and the supervisor is clearly written in the proposal. So if both of them go by the book, go by what is written in the proposal, then the relationship will be successful. So what the proposals look out for? As I said before, this is an excellent opportunity for researchers CV to acquire very important skills, not only research-oriented skills. The working conditions, which is very important, are perfect. And the most important thing for me is that this proposal is written, the core of the proposal is written by the researchers, so the researchers have the opportunity to write a proposal according to their needs and according to their research interests, which is very important. They are going to have 2 years to work on what they really like and the way they really like. And I'd like to say to future applicants to not give up. It's a very competitive call. They have to know it. They have to have a very concrete idea, as I said before, develop this idea, making it as good as possible, apply, and hope for the best. If the proposal is not successful, they don't have to give up. They have to try again, get the evaluator's comment, make the proposal better, and reapply. It's to my view, it's the best proposal for a postdoctoral researcher in Europe.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your experience. I think while we were talking, there was a question that raised to me that was something that Lily, right, mentioned before, that is, now if you don't get at least 70% of the marks, you may not be able to apply a second on the year after. I think, this is my opinion, I think this is quite a big issue, because sometimes when we do our first application, we don't know what what is going to be marked down. And as you say, like sometimes we apply the first time and then we get the feedback and then we can improve on that application and submit again. This for me was quite a big issue in this new strategy. I understand that is to reduce workload, because if the applications are not very good, but we have examples of applications that had less good marks, but you know, like with the feedback, you can improve on them and apply again. I would like to know what should we change then in our first application to make sure, you know, like we don't get excluded from these projects in the year after.
Well, the resubmission restriction is only like you said for 70% or lower. Now to score 70%, you're far away from being funded, because in order to be successful, it depends then of the field, but minimum 90%, you know, usually it's even 93, 94, something like that. Even for the ERA fellowship, which is the widening, which is the second chance, the least that they get funded is 88, 89% of scoring. It's very rare that there are resubmissions where you have scored less than 70% and jump that much and score above 90. But it does happen, because we had one case, one of the applications in the previous call of the individual fellowship, where a Maltese researcher, she also applied with the University of Malta. She scored in the previous year, as far as I remember, 74 or something like that. And now in last call, she scored 94, and she got main listed directly from the main call. So it can happen, big changes, but it's very rarely. So usually it will give you the time to mature, maybe to see how you can improve the proposal in the meantime. So the restriction is only for 1 year, and it will not apply this year. Everyone is free to apply, no matter in the previous calls what they scored. This will be applicable for 2022 call and for those that score less. Now, if you have a good, excellent idea, and maybe the low scoring is a matter of few missing points, that how you structure the proposal, there is ways to improve it. We have these guides, which are excellent guides with tips and tricks to really tells you how, what exactly you should include and what you should not. So if you follow this, and of course you get additional support, like from RSSD, from my end, from the IPAS call that was being mentioned, which gives you the opportunity to hire an external consultant who can also review and help with the application, you are increasing your chances. So in a way, yes, 70% is not harsh. I was thinking at first that the Commission will set much higher percent, so 70% is quite realistic, and it will increase the number of submissions quite a lot, because 11,000 proposals is not a joke. It is really a lot.
I'd like to add a few points here. One point actually. What is a pity is to lose points that you can actually avoid losing them, and for doing that, the applicant must be very careful regarding the template and follow everything that the template says. I guess that the evaluators evaluate the project based on a checklist. So by following the template, actually the applicant is making sure that address every bullet in that checklist. So no matter what the idea is, it's very important to follow the template and the guidelines of that document.
May I add something on that, which is the reason why we are here. I think it's we should not underestimate. It's not just the idea; it's also the scientific track record. So, and to be successful in different proposals as a partner, as an individual like Kostis here, I mean, you need to prove that you have been doing research, you have been publishing your research. I think that's the main passport, I would say. Otherwise, even if I go to conferences, I make a network of people. I tell them that, okay, we have great ideas. At the end of the day, they will say, okay, can you prove that? How can you prove it? You show your science, what you have been doing the past years, and then they will be ready to involve you. Otherwise, there are so many people around, so many groups that they can actually do things and prove that they have the experience to do them. Now, speaking as a partner, okay, as an individual, again, the track record that we start building from our PhD degrees, it's very important, and that's why we continue trying to build this throughout the years with the help of our supervisors and then as independent researchers. Okay.
So, and also I'd like to add, not to be discouraged, because we had 20 proposals for individual fellowships, not postdoctoral fellowships. Can I add a point on this? I'd like to add a point. So from the 20 proposals we supported at RSSD for individual fellowships, not postdoctoral fellowships, 80% passed the threshold. So also with our support at RSSD and International Contact Point, we review your proposals and try to improve on them based on what is required by the core evaluation. So, yeah. So I say, like, sometimes when people apply, they say it's so competitive, why me? And I would say, why not you? You know, like the people who have been awarded with grants are brilliant researchers, but you are too, so why not? And unless you try, like if you don't try, it's 100% you will fail. But if you do try, you do have a chance, right? And it's a learning experience. And even if, for example, lots of researchers, they say, medicine, if I fail, it's a learning experience. I have to learn how to do better, you know?
Yes, and I wanted also to mention one point with regards to the successful relationship between the researcher and the supervisor for for next year for the Horizon Europe. The Commission issued new guidelines for the supervision. I don't know how much these new guidelines should be reflected in the application. Maybe it's one of the tips and tricks that you can use to look at those guidelines and see how much you can copy and paste into your application. What would you advise, Lily?
One must be familiar with these guidelines, but it's not a matter of copy and pasting there. There must be a balance as well of, it's just to be informed and to see how this can be reflected in the application, because it is not the priority here, the supervisor, but it's the actual researcher, and what the researcher can take from the supervision, what the researcher can learn through that fellowship. So yes, one has to familiarize themselves with all the possible materials there. But as Constantino said, it's very important that you reply directly to the points that you're being asked, nothing more and nothing less, because exactly that's how they evaluate. It's a tick. They provide a score according to each of the questions being asked. Did the researcher reply to that? If they give you empty space there, it's not. If you add other things that are not to the point, it will not give any additional points. It will just take from your space. So you have to, 10 pages is not a lot. So you have to see how to fit all the answers in these 10 pages and not go out of the subject.
So if you would like to add something.
No, I agree. I agree what Lily said. Yes, the proposal is very well structured. The guidelines of the template must be followed. Everything should be there, and nothing should be left out.
Fantastic. So if we don't have questions from the audience, virtual audience, we can ask some questions for Vasilis and Aitana. The same, if you can follow the structure of the questions and start with your storytelling. Who would like to start?
Okay, let me start. And I think it was pretty the same, more or less, for the different ITNs that we are currently involved. So how it started the idea, let me tell you about this Protect you've seen the video. So we have, I have been coordinating an Erasmus Plus strategic partnership project, and that was for 3 years. And that was a very relevant, the topic, it was not about climate change, but it was about risk assessment in food safety. And by the end of the project, we have already a consortium. We were about 7 partners. We were happy with the interaction, and we said, okay, what is next? And then we start discussing, and we identified, it was more a kind of a brainstorming, I would say. We identified a topic that we felt it can fit to an ITN consortium, and then we started building on that. We brought new partners, and then we developed the idea. But I would even go back how even this Erasmus Plus was created, because the idea is, okay, how do you make a consortium? How do you bring partners? And this was created, I mean, there is a core of team that you can start contacting. For example, I start contacting people I have been working with them as a postdoc researcher. And that helped a lot because there is already a trust, you have been working with them. So, and then you can explain some possibilities, ideas, funding opportunities. And then this core team can start bringing more people or more partners in this type of consortia. So, and I think this addresses also the second question, what makes a winning and Marie Curie is definitely the consortium, how competitive is each partner. The track record of each partner is very important. It's not necessarily is it University of Malta or University of Oxford, but it's also what they have. This group has been doing the past years, and of course how much we are engaged. Because the idea is not to be written just by one person. I mean. It's possible, it has been done in the past, especially in consortia, but if there are more inputs, then you can see that more ideas are implemented, and it enriches the whole idea and the impact of the whole story there. I mean, that's about the first 2 questions. I don't know if Aitana wants to address these 2, and then we continue.
Okay, so our experience reflects a bit the same one. The project idea was initiated by, let's say, a group of friends and people working together, a very small group, for a long time. We've been working together on different projects related to data protection, privacy, security to a certain extent, but research projects, so in the framework of FP7, let's say. And clearly, the more we talked to employers or practitioners in the field, the more they felt the need to find people who were skilled or trained. And it's good to train on the job, but people will also prefer to employ people who already have the academic background. And then more formally, we did a benchmark to see what were the study programs offered in the field of security and intelligence in Europe and globally, and what were their, let's say, the selling points. And we decided we would go for a joint PhD. We actually had a discussion because and even now, we still discuss whether it would have been an option between a joint master's or a joint PhD. The options were both on the table, but we decided to go for PhD because of the research involved, and Marie Curie was a very good opportunity to fund it. And now, ironically, we are now going for the strategic masters, joint masters with kind of the similar partners in the similar field, because it links well with what we did in our Marie Curie. What makes a winning consortium? I would say, I would completely agree with what I said before, as in how strong not only the organizations are, but the people from those organizations. I think geographical distribution also counted for a lot in our case. Interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary, certainly. I would also actually advise this from an implementation point of view, that you would want to do it, at least for the joint PhD, with people that you've worked before. This is not an easy project, and this is not something that you'll say we'll build on and we'll make it work, because co-supervision is hard, institutional agreements are even harder. So I would say a winning consortium in this field is people who have worked before, know each other well, are the right people from their academic background, and are willing to be involved for the long run, because it's quite difficult. I think from all the Marie Curies, I think the doctorate one might be one of the more difficult, because it's not only you as an institution who commits, you're also very much dependent on the students that you recruit. In our case, there were 15 different candidates. I would make a diverging point on the proposal writing. In our case, it was written by 3 people, because it was for cohesive reasons, we found it easier and it still turned out successfully. But I've also been involved in Horizon projects where it was more of a joint writing process. So I think both work. If you have very good writing, people who know how to write well and they are willing to commit, that's a good option. Having a joint conversation and having different inputs is also a right choice. It's what works for the people.
And I also agree with Aitana. It's not it's not that we equally contribute to the writing, because then it's the challenge would be how to make it a kind of a flow proposal, a proposal that can flow. So yes, I mean, somebody has to lead a bit more, somebody has to integrate the language issues, etc. But yeah, the more inputs, probably the better for the coordinator or for the core team, let's say, okay? So there is not any, yeah, as Aitana said, it depends also on the proposal, it depends on the consortium, but it's always good to know each person what's doing, because then the problem comes when you're about to run, and this is what we're going to address. So this is how the proposal, the writing process is managed. And I think the role of the coordinator of the core team is to assign tasks, because it's something you do by distance. So it's always good to say, okay, now we start describing there's no rule again, but we describe the work packages, because there we can see exactly what we have in mind, how we plan to build up the whole story. And this will be easier for us then to go back to the excellence, keeping in mind excellence, because if there's not something innovative, there's no point to describe these work packages. But we start with this, the core team or coordinators should assign tasks, because otherwise things will just be floating forever. And then we set deadlines. That's important, because we are all so busy. If we don't have the deadlines, then things will be delayed forever. Now, tips and tricks, I would go also to the fact that a lot of these proposals are a result of resubmission. In our case, they were all a result of resubmission. And what we're doing, we're going back to the comments, we're trying to address them. We're trying to make the consortium stronger. And we start bringing, for example, we realize the importance of companies. So we start bringing big companies in the consortium, addressing the comments and then hoping for a better performance, or trying to make sure that we take into account current trends. I mean, the climate change also became suddenly, after we have the first submission, it became really a very important topic. So I think it was also a matter of a luck at that point, that it was appreciated that there is a research project trying to address these issues. I will also answer the project management story. I mean, in the description, there is a whole procedure how to follow that. There are even deliverables to prove that you manage it based on the description that you promised. The role of coordinator is key. It's very important, and it's a requirement in any case to have work package leaders. So, I mean, this is not, as soon as you make a consortium that you can interact and you can trust working with them, it will not be a problem. So that's why it's important also to start working with people that you have been doing something in the past, or you have a positive vibe, let's say. It happened, I remember in one case, I approached a researcher just based on the track record. We have never met because she was coming from a different discipline, but it was so impressive, the track record, and for us it was important to have this person in the consortium, and it worked fine. I mean, we didn't have any problem to collaborate. I don't know if, Aitana, you want to speak about this before we go to the last one?
I think for our type of project, what mattered the most, I mean, in tips and tricks, was ambition. Yes, I think in Lily's presentation, you said that there needs to be one fellow for organization. We obviously went for 15 for 5 degree granting organizations. So that means that we had 3 fellows. And ambition mattered. So it wasn't a small project. It was a large project, very interdisciplinary. So I think that also matters, being a bit brave. It's not easy, but I think it's worth it, including in evaluation. And then second, for the second point, I want to second the first presentation, is clarity. We were very explicit about all the administrative part, about the institutional framework, about we had to already identify all the 15 research topics there at the time. before we even had a fellow to speak to. The recruitment strategy was very clearly detailed, our connections, where they would go for secondments. So we provided details even where the proposal, let's say, did not require us to be that explicit. And I think that really gave, and it was also reflected in the evaluation, that got a feeling of clarity. We were people who knew what we wanted to do and had a very clear, detailed step of how we were going to do it. And in this case, I think this matters because perhaps some people underestimate the complexity of it all. And perhaps if you don't detail it as much, I can only imagine it's not going to be well evaluated because they think you're not ready for the and it is a bit strange because you're not the ones carrying the research in such a project. It's the 15 people that you do not know and who you're going to recruit at some distant point in the future. And you are bound by what you write. But I think it's important that you write well, clearly, and really, in this case, I think really provide the utmost detail that you can do in the limit of space and to the point that it is required. As for management, I can only advise get a good coordinator. A bad coordinated project is really not it's really important who the coordinator is, and we have had many projects where that was actually a discussion and people voted for a certain coordinator because it needs to be somebody who's good for that. And what we used in this project, because of the size, but again, it's not something that works for everyone, we had an informal co-coordinator, so the coordinator chose from among the other partners somebody to help, and it really helped take the burden because there's a lot of communications, especially with our students. There are many different problems, mainly administrative, mainly financial, institutional, and all of this need to be managed, and it can be quite a burden even for the most experienced coordinators. So sometimes it's good to have, let's say, a co-coordinator who can do a bit of the interface. So that's our, let's say, extra bit.
And just to finish up with the management aspect, I was just thinking that there is also, we don't refer to that, there is the micromanagement and the macromanagement, because the micromanagement is us with the researchers, how we are dealing with everyday problems. I mean, we are doing a lot of lab work, for example. Delay on delivery of consumables is something I have to deal with that by chasing suppliers, which is something, of course, it's not the most exciting thing to do in my life. And this is a while speaking about research with the ESRs, it's the most exciting part, I would say. There is also the internal university management for which RSO supports with the financial issues. And I'm in a close contact with them. It's very important to see even about payments, about the mobility, organization. I mean, we do breakdown of budget to make sure how the total budget is managed and to clarify what is for the training aspects, what is for the salaries, etc. And then there is the macro management that comes from the coordinator and in relation also to what we need to deliver. And this is what actually the Commission checks, and it's very important. So there are a lot of elements and steps to discuss about the management itself. Now, the experience so far, I mean, things are going well because, as Aitana said, we have good coordinators, at least for this one that is already running 2 years. The other, now we experience big problems with the recruitment, and this has to do with a lot of issues. I think Aitana mentioned that before. Even you want to get the best in the world, actually, researchers, okay, to work with them to focus on tasks that you promise there. And there is the issue also with issuing working visas. There are a lot of problems that are not actually controlled completely from the University of Malta, and this is creating a lot of anxiety from my side because I don't know when is the starting date, for example, okay? We need to wait probably a bureaucratic procedure to be resolved, for which we don't have a date. So this is a big of a challenge, I think, which we currently experience, especially with the new ones. I mean, the COVID was a challenge as well, how we handle the mobilities, but then it's always a matter of communication because it's an experience that doesn't refer only to our project or a problem that's not referring only to our project. So then the coordinator has to communicate with the Commission, and there are ways to resolve these issues. I think it's overall, yeah, it's a very exciting research. It's really based on training, and this is probably we miss it sometimes. It is a bit of a challenge because it's not the classical PhDs that we have been supervising that they spend most of the time in our university, in our laboratories. They have to be mobilized, they have to go to other places, they have to attend a lot of summer schools or any type of workshops. So the training is the most important element that probably takes over other things that we would like to prioritize. For example, probably trying to publish more papers. But on the other hand, I think it's the interesting aspect of this type of networks. I mean, you train the young generation of researchers in the best universities, to my opinion, or the best groups, let's say, in Europe.
Would you like to ask?
I can only second everything that was said. And I would add that, yes, indeed, the bureaucratic part is hard. We also found it difficult to complete the joint degree requirement. It's again not something, it's very frustrating, I think, for people implementing such actions because it's not something you can influence. It's something that your organization needs to be on board, and it's quite difficult, especially because while the research groups might be well matched in terms of research, universities are not in terms of ranking. And therefore, there's a lot of difficulties getting higher ranked universities sign these joint degrees in the context of Marie Curie. I would also say that employing third country nationals is difficult, especially in our case. We found we would have liked to have more support. Also, I find a bit strange how the Commission really encourages this, but it doesn't really have any help to offer when you are faced with, like we were not being granted security permits, not having our students pressured, not being granted visas for their families to reunite. So all these difficulties that, of course, were not, or created also differences between the quality of experience that our different ESRs had, which is not something desirable, and it's also difficult to manage. I would also add something about joint supervision. It is hard, especially in an interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary part. So I think I can only describe our experience of 4 years like a roller coaster. It had its ups, and certainly seeing them, some of them reach now at the end of their PhDs and having this rich experience, and also all the training that we had together, and it also made us better supervisors. But the difficulties were numerous, and the delays were also numerous. I think people also a bit underestimate the difficulty in recruiting, the delays that occur, and you have very little control. And I think this is very different to a research project like Horizon, where as it is more based on the researcher, if you carry out your research, then it should be done in time. But in this case, you depend on so many different other factors. But otherwise, it is very much worth it. I think as a research team, it made us better. We now have some of our ESRs as employees in our department. So we certainly saw, at least we kept some of them, and we are the better for that. And not only us, all the different universities have had this opportunity. And we saw some being offered very good positions in other organizations, which is again something to be proud of. And from our point of view, the joint degrees that we signed, the agreements that we signed, the joint supervision clearly opened opportunities for further joint programs. So it's also a good stepping stone, because once you have that, you did the battle, you have those in place, you can consider, you can explore various options, which I think is also good for the university as a whole.
Thank you very much. So we can conclude that the rule. Okay. Okay.
So for people who have granted IF, is the IF very strict after it was acquired, which means that you have to follow the proposal and goals and can't change it? Okay, so you're saying like once it's awarded, like do you really have to follow it strictly? Just a second. Or is it flexible where you can easily modify your goals and targets where you're working based on your results and what comes out of the research?
Excuse me, I didn't get the last part.
Yeah, he's just saying like, do you need to really stick to the proposal, or can you be flexible? Because from what I understood, he's saying like during the project there will be some research findings which can change the direction of your project.
Okay.
Can you be flexible, or do you need to stick to what you've written in the proposal?
Well, first of all, the deliverables described in the proposal are different than the deliverables that uploaded in the system. Okay, I have different milestones and deliverables regarding the research work, but at the board. Can you hear me? Yes, but at the portal, I have to upload the data management plan and the final report after the end of the project. Well, the research objectives of the project must be fulfilled. What the researcher writes in the proposal must be accomplished. Okay, the research objectives. Now, maybe the order. I mean, okay. Specifically in my proposal, I said that I will publish that many journal papers, that many conference papers. I didn't write any dates for that papers. Okay, so this can be considered as a flexibility. But in general, yes, what is written in the proposal should be done. That's my understanding. I don't know.
Maybe just in terms of research, if something is, of course, something unexpected happens because of certain results, this is something that you have to think at the proposal stage and include as a risk. So once included as a risk, you also have to mention the mitigation measure. So this will give you the flexibility in terms of the actual research. You have to think ahead and see what are the eventual risks that maybe will not have certain outcomes, or of course it depends on your proposal, and list as much as possible there. So this will allow you for some flexibility.
But in general, we can say that the rule is that there is no rule. You have to tackle the problem as they arrive, and take it one step at a time, and consider it as your journey, and don't be discouraged when things don't go your way. You have to actually keep your fingers in so many pies. As you mentioned, you used your experience with cost, you used your experience with your access, and this helped you to build your consortium and go forward with such a good experiences as Marie Skłodowska-Curie. And it was very interesting for you to mention that you actually voted for the coordinator. I never heard about such a thing as consortium voting between themselves and then selecting the co-coordinator, which is very important. So the next point in our discussion is the presentation from one of our panel members who couldn't be here in person. So would you like to start the video? And Helen Greg will introduce herself. She will start her video with the introduction, right?
Good afternoon. I am Helen Greg from the University of Malta. I work within the Department of Communication Therapy of the Faculty of Health Sciences. And I'm going to share my experience as an awardee of the Marie Curie Actions in a few minutes. Okay, so basically, I have been very lucky in having been awarded 2 Marie Curie fellowships. I will start with the more recent one, which is not as recent, which was an intra-European fellowship under the FP7 program. And these are currently falling within the postgraduate fellowships as IFs. And earlier on, I also benefited from another grant under the FP6 program, which was a transfer of knowledge. And nowadays, this would fall under the RISE program, which is geared for international and intersectoral cooperation through the research and innovation of staff exchanges. And here I was very lucky that I welcomed an international expert from Australia who helped me develop an assessment protocol, which I then standardized for Maltese, monolingual and bilingual children through the IAF. Okay, so what should the fellow expect to achieve? In actual fact, it is not just the successful completion of the project. You earn much more than that as a Marie Curie Fellow. And you find out as you go along and even following completion of the project. So primarily, obviously, you will be conducting an innovative research project under supervision of experts who very often, obviously, are international experts, not local experts, in a well-resourced host institution. So make sure that you choose your supervisor or supervisors and the host institution very carefully. You will have the opportunity to publish in high impact journals, and nowadays it is obligatory that they have to be open access journals. You can also share your data in open access related to your project, but this is not obligatory. You will be trained in soft skills, communication skills, grant proposals. I specifically put it under a separate bullet here, and perhaps technical skills that you need further training or initial training in relation to your project. It has to be related to your project, of course, and you gain much more than that, as I said earlier on. In fact, I was very lucky. I was based in Ireland, in Limerick, for my fellowship. And for the transfer of knowledge, I moved between England and Malta, and I received the expert locally as well to help me with the project. In fact, a year after, I was surprised to have been informed that I was awarded recognition of leadership by the President of Ireland in relation to the project which I carried out in Limerick at the University of Limerick. That was my host institution. In relation to Ireland's Champions of EU Research. So, you know, you will gain a lot through the fellowship. It's really worth submitting and persevering. So, what areas of research are expected from postgraduate fellowships? It's very open. Bottom-up ideas are very welcome. So they're not restricted. Important that you highlight innovation and originality. That's very, very important in your proposal. And that you have to clearly indicate how your project goes beyond the state of the art. So clearly mention the state of the art in that area of your project, your proposed project, and how you will go beyond it. And it's very important that you address your contribution to European and, if necessary, international competitiveness. They will look at that. I am also have been lucky and have been involved in evaluating these proposals as well. But the scope of my presentation here is not related to evaluation. So I will move on to give you more information related to my experience as a grant awardee. Okay, so what type of research will be funded? High quality, and collaborative research. Very, very important to highlight inter and multidisciplinarity, because the evaluators will look for that. Has to obviously contribute to scientific excellence, so make sure that you include this in your proposal. High socioeconomic impact. Very often projects do relate to this, but you need to highlight this. And nowadays, it's very, very important not to forget, because this is the last part of the proposal, and very often we see as, that, you know, the excellence part is addressed relatively well, and that has a high weight, a lot of weighting actually, high percentage. And then there's the impact section, and then there's the implementation. And the implementation, by that stage, you're either rushing to submit the proposal or you're fatigued, but it's also important, and it carries weighting. And if you fail to establish or reach the threshold for this criterion, then unfortunately you won't get it, because you need to reach threshold for each of the 3 criteria as indicated in the proposal and the guidelines for experts. Okay, I mentioned inter and or multidisciplinarity is important to mention. The team has to be convincing in its efficiency and effectiveness, okay, of the project management. In relation to, that's very, very important. Communication, then look at how you communicate with your supervisor, how regularly, if there is a group of a management group that you will relate to, who will be monitoring you. I will be talking about in a while about secondment, if you're interested, because monitoring even at the seconded placement has to be carried out and convincing. Obviously, you need to mention how and how regularly you will be reporting and to whom. Finance management, very often that is not in your hands, it's in the hand of the host institution, but you need to know what's going on and monitor what's going on. And we're lucky because at the University of Malta now we have a good, robust financial management team that will really back you up. Don't forget risk management and contingency plans, okay? Without them, you will fail to convince the evaluators that you should get high scoring. So, where can I go during the fellowship? There is the opportunity for secondment here, spending part of the fellowship elsewhere, not necessarily in an academic institution, okay? So if you have a technical project, go to industry. It's very, very important, all right? But don't forget to include the letters of intent. Sometimes they are not submitted. I think they're part of Section A of the proposal. And expert evaluators will look for them, okay? Because you need to convince the evaluators that it's trustworthy in the European Commission investing in your project and your mobility. So there's the mobility, and there's the base for the project implementation, your host institution. You will be allowed to go to meetings, even elsewhere, not within necessarily within your host institution only, and attend conferences and participate in conference seminars. Hopefully, we will be able to do more face-to-face meetings in the near future. So do grab the opportunity, okay? And if you are within Europe, then you will be allowed to spend a part of your fellowship, that is the secondment, elsewhere in Europe, okay? So do grab every opportunity, because you'll get funded for all this, and the funding is substantial. You won't starve, definitely. Okay, who are the expert evaluators? I thought of just mentioning it. Scientists, researchers, business people, managers from companies. So, they're a mixture. Very often they mix academics. The group is mixed, academics and people from other areas. So do consider that when you're writing the proposal. And they are very often really spot on experts in the field. I have been involved in selecting experts, not for my project, of course, but nowadays I am involved. And there's a database of really thousands of experts. So very often we do select experts who are really spot on in relation to your project. So don't underestimate it. So when you write your proposal, bear that in mind, okay? You're not going to fool anyone because it's very competitive. So obviously, and the EC is investing a lot of money. You will eventually get an ESR, what we call evaluation summary report, even if you don't get the funding. This is really helpful for resubmission in particular. Okay, you can reshape and readdress your weaknesses. They will tell you what strengths you have and what weaknesses you have. But you will get a complete, when you resubmit, completely different set of evaluators, okay, who will evaluate your resubmission blindly. They will not know that it's a resubmission until the very, very, very end, when they score, and then they are told that this was a resubmission, okay? So bear that in mind. And it is really a consensus, they have to reach a consensus, okay? And the EC doesn't interfere. It leaves the scoring in the hands, and the ESR in the hands of the experts, vice chairs, accordingly, okay? So I wish you the very best. I am accessible. If anyone is interested in contacting me, feel free to do so. My email address is on the university website. Good luck.
Thank you very much. I think now on our agenda is lunch. We're very sorry, we're 1 minute overdue with our panel, but thank you very much for your participation, and let's keep in touch. We will forward you any questions we get from the audience, and we will definitely publish some follow-up in the Think magazine of University of Malta. Thank you. Okay.
So thank you everyone for this very, very interesting panel discussion.